Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Hey everybody, and welcome to, or I guess welcome back to, the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thanks a lot for coming along on the journey of this show that was designed to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, make sure that you visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor to co-host this show every week with Craig Brown, an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. Hey, Craig, how are you today?
I'm great, Thom. Good to be back together again. We've got a few podcasts lined up here in the next week or so this will be a lot of fun. And today we're kind of back to something that is similar to what I left. So I hope people find it insightful.
Great. Well, each week we try to be insightful because every week we try to bring to this show interesting interviews and other ideas that are going to help all of the listeners enhance and grow their careers. And today is going to be awesome because we have Mike Hughes, and he is the Program Director of Digital Engineering for Cummins. Hey, Mike, welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hey, Mike, so what is your backstory? Sort of what got you into this world of technology and stuff? Where did you come from, and then what do you do today?
Sure. So I work for Cummins. I've been here now for almost 12 years, I believe. I think that's about right, but I was at a few other places prior. And how I started really is was kind of in a, like you start most companies, you kind of start and they start putting you in multiple different positions and in different areas just to try to see, what you like to do. And so I gravitated more and more to, I'm a big thinker, and I obviously learned that about myself as things continued. And as PLM, I was introduced more and more to it. I started to see at Cummins, different facets of PLM that were attractive to me, and I had a passion around them, so I started going after them. And so since then, my last role, which I was in for a while, it was called Modeling and Simulation Services. So it's a piece of, obviously, PLM. And what we were really looking at is how do we take the company from a maturity level and make a step change from where we were. So started that in 2013, and then still doing some of those, still have some of those responsibilities, but now in an area called digital engineering, so a little bit more responsibility, and now covering things like digital twins. And so, which involves lots of pieces of PLM, especially when you're trying to connect multiple data sets and you have many different silos of data, and trying to, optimize the data at the end of the day to produce value for the customer. So that's a little bit about my history.
Hey, Mike, this is Craig. It's good to hear your voice again. You and I have done a couple things together at Purdue, and I was reminded listening to your background, I think I know why we get along so well. We have a very similar path. So this idea that the guy running modeling and simulation, I used to do that for powertrain at GM for new methods, is now a PLM leader or a digital engineering transformation leader. I find that kind of interesting. In a sense, we were pushing new technology. And I think technology, the pace of technology changes is really amazingly broad and amazingly fast. How do you keep abreast of it all? Or maybe that's why you became the transformation leader, is you're more in tune with those other changes than others. So I'm curious, how do you keep abreast of it all? What advice do you have for folks following our path?
Yeah, so I think the key is in a lot of companies, you have to be doing things, within the year to that add value, but then you also have to ensure whatever you're doing is leading towards, some future that brings value. And so I think the first thing is a lot of people have to stop and actually really try to understand at the highest level, the trajectory of where things are going. So, for example, at Cummins, we know product complexity is not slowing down. We have more and more. We have fuel cells. We are now in electrification. We have natural gas engines, hybrids. It keeps going on and on. And then you add automation like capabilities in the products. And then, so those are all I would call it moving disruptive items moving really quick. And so you got to kind of pan out, when are those different items going to take hold, and when do you need to invest? And then you have to kind of move it to some other ecosystems and look at how they've evolved. And so if you look at some of the most complex systems, in the world that you can think of, so things maybe that you would see from NASA or other areas, and you see where they're at now, it gives you a little bit of guidance in terms of, for example, we really should probably start thinking about systems engineering, because these things are getting very complex. Well, what's that mean for when we're doing our modeling work? And so I think that's the first step, is just to really stop and immerse yourself, and for example, 2030, and try to understand where things are going. So keep the end in mind, but then you've got to keep track of the maturity of these technologies versus your business to understand when's the right time to invest. So whether it's IoT platforms or 3D printing or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and so you mentioned systems engineering, and all of us in the car and truck business, and you provide engines to all of us, right? In this business, systems engineering is becoming more important. But it's interesting to me, the challenge the guys at NASA or Space Systems have is they don't know a lot about mass production. And so I find that not only do I have to be aware of what maybe they're doing to handle complexity, but then they want to learn from us. Well, how do you get this lean manufacturing principles and efficiency, and even managing a product line? So I think to the listeners, not only do you need to be aware of the technology, but you should know where you're maybe the leader, and you might actually help those other people, because part of this is a partnership. I think that's what I like about our interaction at places like Purdue is we're competitors in a sense, but on a different sense, we need to move the art forward, if you will, in order to be better at doing systems, and especially complex systems. Now, part of the reason we were at Purdue is we're engaging with an initiative that Professor Hartman runs. And I think one of the questions that always comes up with these things is, do our legacy systems at companies turn off the next generation? And is that a problem? So I wondered what your thoughts about that are. I mean, I remember coming to Central Indiana and dealing with a mainframe at the office, and at home I had a workstation because I worked for a software company that had workstations. Now, this is 1988. It's a long time ago. What I'm curious is this a problem we corporations have in attracting the talent, is telling them to use legacy systems?
Yeah, all companies who have been around a long time, have this same problem. So it's more of a expectation. If you are coming out of college, don't be surprised if you do see these types of things. But I think we try to keep like a multifaceted type of approach to this. So when we're, for example, recruiting new employees, for one, we try to kind of strategically and creatively think about how to recruit them. So bringing innovative ways that show where Cummins is going, and then laser in terms of if they're interns or co-ops or whatever they may be, to give them to really give them a laser focus on their work plans and the breadth of what a company like ours can bring. And so I think a lot of folks coming out of, for example, college, they really don't realize there's 40, 50 different type of engineering roles, or they may not realize there are all these different types of roles within IT. And so I think that's the key piece, is really setting expectations up front, and then hope to God they have a good manager that can guide them along. But yeah.
Well, that's good insight. Those of you that are younger listening, if you don't get a good manager that can help you coach and explain why these old legacy systems are important, then find another one. I'm serious. Don't leave the company.
Yeah.
Just find a better match to what piques your interest. So yeah. What about workforce development? We both, for our own reasons, helped there at Purdue, partly because Nate knows us and it's in central United States. But are there other things we should be doing for workforce development that maybe we aren't doing?
I think the program that Purdue has started, I think, is the start of many good things, and I think they're, I would say, one of the few universities right now doing what they're doing in terms of trying to prepare the manufacturing sector for what's coming. And so when you think about, like I mentioned earlier, whether it's 3D printing or even in some cases 3D CAD, you've got lots of suppliers, whether they're small or medium-sized companies that may have only lived in the 2D realm, but now when things move to 3D, or let's just say in the future you have more and more 3D metal printers, with that comes new skill sets. And so, and then if, something else that we've been looking at lately is not only is it the understanding those tools, but starting to understand the data, all the pieces of data and the traceability that now more and more companies are wanting to, again, optimize what their end result. And so whether it's quality or improving your product or whatever it may be. So I think the key is those folks need to realize the world is changing and it's changing because we have to remain competitive. And so, yeah, I think the things that are happening through Purdue are great, and we're definitely partners with them. We see the value of what they're doing.
So you're a big thinker, and you are aware of obviously printing parts. We've talked about that a couple of times on these podcasts. Do you what in your mind for a company like Cummins, what has to be true for 3D printing for it to be used in the mainstream?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think scale is a key part. So volume, so that you can, you can scale in the higher volume parts. I mean, last year or the year before, I think we produced 1.5 million engines. So we produce lots of things. And there's competitive drivers to why we want to do that. With 3D printing, you have less assembly line stations because you have less parts. You can have more complex parts that can potentially optimize your product. You have, many things like that. But with that, I think we still have a ways to go. The tools, in terms of software tools, are still maturing. The printer technology is still maturing. But we're definitely invested, and we do think that there's opportunities there. So just to give you an idea, binder jetting is one area that we're looking into heavily. And you can print 60 to 100 times faster than a traditional laser-based printing process. And so there's definitely opportunities, but again, it's a maturing world, so it's not ready like right now, but it's getting there.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think scale, the investment, the practices, like all electronics assembly, some of the printing will require a clean room attitude, which we have in a lot of our factories for mechanical systems, whether we're cutting gears or making pistons. But it's a different mindset, and so some of the manufacturing skills we have actually have to change. Not necessarily the discipline about looking at lean and so on, but also just how do we invest in this stuff, and when is it time? I know at Siemens, the big Siemens, they too are, they build motors and windmills and things like that, and they've also raised some of these same points. And all of us in mass production, it's just a matter of time. So for you folks that are newer in your careers, get very comfortable with the idea that you'll be able to make a part that you have been told is impossible to make because you can't mill it or bend it, right? And so printing will just bring a whole new set of choices that you can make. Kind of interesting.
Yep.
So
yeah,
no, go ahead. That's fine.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, and the skill set scenario there, it is very broad from folks who have to calibrate the printers and all the facets of that to to an advanced engineer who's doing multidisciplinary optimization and essentially simulating the entire printing process to build this part that they can put together much faster than they could with previous methods. So doing things like CAD morphing and many other things like that, so that you're designing the optimal part. So yeah, that's what I was saying is, I mentioned tools and printers, but I didn't talk a lot about skill sets. But skill sets, it is there's definitely going to be a big impact there, and it's a different way of thinking. When we talk to our designers today, many of their minds are so baked into the ways we manufacture things today, and so it is definitely different.
So Mike, you and I have a very similar background, and I used to have the following challenge, and I'm wondering how you handled it. The challenge was, my friends, not in the industry, right, outside, from church or from college or whatever, my friends would ask, "What is it you do?" and it's great you got this title, PLM, in my case with PLM leader, but what does it mean to be the digital engineering transformation program director? I mean, how do you explain that to your friends?
Yeah, so it just depends on who I'm talking to.
Well, that's so lesson one. Know your audience.
Yeah. So if it's somebody inside the company, a close friend, first I walk through to them. In most companies, large companies today, PLM for most companies means product data management or CAD data management. So when you say PLM, that's all they think about.
Right.
And so I typically take those folks down a quick journey on, the future business opportunities and our current problems, and then really start talking to them about the growing importance of how we have lots of silos of data. People are also in the silos, our processes, et cetera. And I talk about the complexity of that system, but then we're being pushed to obviously always improve our product quality, make better products, et cetera. And so when all those complexities come together, data becomes a key piece of it. And so then I really start then going into, this used to be called, PLM in its true sense, but now more and more places are calling this like digital engineering or digital X. And so I walk them through that and just really talk about, the organic nature of how complexity just continues and continues because we're trying to optimize everything. And so so for someone inside the company, that's typically how I'll explain it.
How about somebody outside the company, like mom and dad, or I don't know, maybe your parents are engineers, but
Yeah. So I'll give you, when we go talk to, through STEM events or whatever to elementary kids, it actually is a great primer. People that work for me on my team, I send them to these, we go to these things quite a bit, and it actually helps them put their elevator speech together.
Yeah, exactly.
Think about it from the perspective of a 7th or 8th grader. And so I typically walk through, 4 areas that we support, and then I try to put it into their world. So I ask them, have you ever invented something? And then we walk kind of through together of, okay, what did it take to invent it? Right? You had this idea, and then you sketched it out on a piece of paper, and and I walk through that, and then I'm able to relate that to what it means in what we do.
Well, that's really excellent. It's a life cycle, and I think people forget what the acronym means. It is product life cycle management, and I had a control system background, and then the simulation assignment that you mentioned earlier, and then chose to be the PLM leader because I thought all these silos should be more orchestrated, more coordinated, without necessarily telling one silo you have to integrate with another silo, meaning transfer your data. So it's interesting. I think maybe we should go back to what the words are, right? Product lifecycle management, not parts or not CAD file management, right? There's a lot of other pieces of data about a product that has to be managed well. And it's interesting to talk with inventors as eighth graders who are thinking about the life cycle. How will it be used? How will you dispose of it? Was a great idea, but it didn't work when we did the initial test. Well, why was that? These are all aspects of a life cycle. So, well, it's been fascinating chatting with you. Best of luck at Cummins and the rest of your digital transformation. And I think I'm really proud of you being involved with this stuff at Purdue. I too think they're one of the more innovative programs in the country. And I like the focus to really suppliers of ours, which are these mid-sized companies that maybe build tools for us or build some prototype parts. So that's part of what we're focused on. And with that, Thom, I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, Mike, there was a couple things as I was listening to you guys talk that I always like to come back with some questions that kind of go to the end listener, kind of like, so what for their career? You described yourself in the introduction as a big thinker, that you think big. And I think that's awesome. And I see that a lot with my friends who are engineers. I think that for a lot of engineers, that's part of where you have to be, but not everybody's there. And so if someone else picked up on that and they think, God, I need to be a big thinker, is there anything someone can do to sort of widen the way they look at the opportunities in the world and product?
So what I have found is a lot relates to like literally the psychology of some people. And so some people have to understand the details before they get into the big picture. And some people have to understand the big picture before they go down to the details. And so I think you need to learn. The first piece is to learn more about yourself, because some people may have not have thought about this before, but it's very true. And I've learned it just from managing people. And so that, I think that's the first piece. But if you do want to, start thinking big, you really have to start asking the right questions, and getting your mind in a mindset where you are trying to really understand the problems that we're going to face in the future, the business problems. Because if not, then quite honestly, if you're working for a company, you need to drive a P&L at the end of the day. And so you really need to understand and ask the right problems at, let's just say 10 years out, and start moving back in reverse. And so there's lots of different ways that you can there's lots of people that research this. And so for your different markets, for example, at Cummins, we're in many markets. We're in agricultural, mining, we're in shipping, we're on highway trucks, et cetera. So for those different markets, you really have to understand, where's it going? So, for example, in the mining space, it's moving more and more into autonomous. And so what does that look like, 10 years from now? Because it takes a long time for those ecosystems to evolve. But you have to be aware of the business factors involved.
And that's a great example. I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, those are just a couple quick concepts.
So across industry, so you mentioned mining and automation. A lot of times people get overwhelmed by the press of, autonomous vehicles are imminent. Well, when they're imminent, you'll see them in mines first, because it's a controlled roadway, then trucking, because it goes, it's a easier environment to sense and understand. And then eventually city traffic, but it'll be in that order. So those of you that are thinking autonomous vehicles are coming, keep watching mining industries and see if you see them there first, right? And that's an example of big thinking, is seeing how technology will progress through different industries.
Well, and that's a really interesting and spot on answer, because I've been interviewing a bunch of really successful CEOs kind of across industry lines. And one of the most common answers when I ask, how come you've been successful when other people get stuck? One of the answers that has come up, especially recently, is I ask better questions. And it sort of shocked me, because like 3 people in a row gave that answer who were not related to each other. And so when you said that, I laughed, because this has definitely become, of recently in the last year, a really important thing that's clear that people need to be doing, and that is asking questions.
Yeah.
So the other thing,
stay curious.
Stay curious.
Right? we've talked about that before. And Mike, you have a natural curiosity, which I think is another hallmark of a big thinker, is you're restlessly curious, right? You're curious about everything. So that's a good thing.
So the other thing that you said that I wanted to touch on, and it kind of fits along with this, is you were talking about how a lot of these people, when they come out of college and they have an engineering degree, they don't realize that there might be more than 50 types of careers around their engineering degree. And, be it engineering, be it IT. How do people discover this? You said in your own introduction that, when you got to work, they put you in a lot of different areas. So you got to discover what you like. But people who work for smaller companies don't necessarily get to do that sort of rotational work. How can people discover what the options are and what they're going to gravitate to, like you were able to do?
Yeah. So a couple of things. So small companies, I did work for one, and the benefit is you do many roles. So you are operating kind of as the system. But then as you get into a larger companies, then that's when I mentioned the silos. So you've got, and the bigger the company, the more fine-tuned everyone's role is. And so again, I think the key here is that you have to have a good boss that exposes you to the company, or else you're just going to be doing and turning the crank on your projects day in, day out. And you won't get exposed to these types of things. So most companies have like development programs where they'll swing a group of people, in different countries so that they can understand the cultures, but also in different types of engineering roles, so they can get kind of a broad spectrum of and an understanding of it. Another area in companies I see where you can get this exposure is really through doing Six Sigma work. And so in some companies, like you'll have a person who does Six Sigma, and they're in, let's just say, your engineering organization, but in there you're working on this diverse set of projects. So again, you're getting exposure into these different engineering roles.
Awesome. Well, Mike, hey, thank you so much for joining us here for this discussion here on the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Any last words?
Nope, I don't have anything. Thanks for having me.
Well, Mike,
Mike.
Again, thanks for being here.
Okay.
And thanks to everybody who tuned in and listened. If you like the show, tell your friends and keep coming back. We've been doing this now for over 6 months, and the audience is growing. We're getting some good feedback. If there's topics that you want to hear, reach out directly to the Digital Enterprise Society and let us know what topics you would like Craig and I to cover here on the show. And make sure you join us next week for more thoughts, ideas, and information in and around product lifecycle management. Hey, the Digital Enterprise Society, it is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.